Before we begin, ask yourself this question. What would you do if you woke up on the same day over and over again? Not a pleasant day, not a day where everything goes right, but a day where someone you love dies every single time. Would you try to save them? Of course you would. But what if saving one person only meant someone else would die instead? What if the universe itself was playing a game with you and you were always going to lose? What I'm about to tell you is the story of Sarah Mitchell, and I'm warning you now, this isn't a feel-good Christmas tale. This is a story about sacrifice, impossible choices, and a woman who discovered that sometimes the only way to save everyone you love is to let go of yourself. If you think you can handle that, if you're ready to descend into a nightmare wrapped in Christmas lights and false cheer, then keep watching, because once you start, you won't be able to look away. Hit that subscribe button right now, turn on notifications, because you're going to want to remember this channel when you're lying awake tonight, thinking about what you just heard. And if you make it to the end, if you're brave enough to hear how this really ends, leave a comment telling me, would you make the same choice Sarah did? Now let's begin. Sarah Mitchell's eyes snapped open to the sound of Mariah Carey's "All I Want for Christmas" blasting from her radio alarm. The red digital numbers glowed 7 a.m., December 24th, Christmas Eve. She groaned and reached over to slap the alarm off, then grabbed her phone from the nightstand. 3 missed texts from her sister Emma, all sent within the last hour. "Sarah, don't forget the cranberry sauce." "Mum's stressing about having enough chairs. Can you bring your folding ones?" "Also, Tom's bringing his new girlfriend. Mom's already judging her from the Facebook photos, LOL. Sarah typed back a quick, "Got it," and dragged herself out of bed. She was 32 years old, recently unemployed, freshly single, and absolutely dreading this family gathering. Her parents' house, the forced cheerfulness, the inevitable arguments hiding beneath holiday politeness. Everyone pretending their lives were perfect when Sarah's was currently falling apart. She showered, threw on a red sweater and jeans, and made herself a cup of coffee that she barely tasted. Her apartment felt too quiet, too empty. She'd been living alone for 3 months now, ever since Marcus had moved out, taking half the furniture and all of the warmth with him. Christmas used to be her favorite holiday. Now it just felt like a reminder of everything she'd lost. By 11:30 a.m., Sarah was in her car, driving through snow-covered streets toward her childhood home in the suburbs. The cranberry sauce and folding chairs rattled in her trunk. Christmas music played on every radio station. Everyone else in the world seemed happy. Her parents' house stood at the end of Maple Street, a 2-story colonial that her father had covered in enough Christmas lights to be seen from space. Sarah pulled into the driveway behind Emma's minivan and sat there for a moment, gathering her strength. She could do this. It was just one day, 24 hours. Then she could go home, spend Christmas Day alone with Netflix and wine, and pretend everything was fine. Sarah grabbed the cranberry sauce and headed inside. The smell hit her immediately. Pine from the massive Christmas tree in the living room, mixed with cinnamon, roasting turkey, and her mother's famous sugar cookies. It smelled like childhood, like safety, like a time before everything got complicated. "Sarah, finally!" Her mother, Margaret, appeared from the kitchen, wearing a festive apron and a stressed expression. She was 63, with greying hair she refused to dye, and worry lines that had deepened over the years. "Did you bring the cranberry sauce?" "Right here, Mom." "Oh, thank God. Your father forgot to buy it yesterday, even though it was on the list." "The list, Sarah? I don't know why I bother making lists if no one reads them." Her father's voice boomed from the living room. "I heard that, Margaret. I was busy fixing the fireplace." "The fireplace that's worked perfectly fine for 30 years and didn't need fixing." Sarah exchanged a glance with Emma, who had appeared in the kitchen doorway with a glass of wine already in hand. Emma was 3 years older, with the tired eyes of a mother of 2, and the permanent slight frown of someone who'd given up on relaxing. "Welcome to Christmas," Emma whispered, handing Sarah a glass. "You're going to need this." The house was already chaotic. Emma's kids, Sophie and Jake, were racing around the living room, high on sugar and excitement. Sophie was 10, all gangly limbs and missing front teeth. Jake was 7, with his father's dark hair and his mother's mischievous smile. They'd already knocked over one decoration and spilled juice on the carpet. Emma's husband David was helping Robert, Sarah's father, fiddle with the fireplace that didn't need fixing. David was a quiet man, an accountant who preferred numbers to people, and he looked grateful to have a task that kept him away from the chaos. And then Tom arrived. Sarah's younger brother burst through the front door at 12:30, bringing a gust of cold air and his usual golden retriever energy. He was 28, worked in tech sales, and had their mother's blonde hair and easy charm. Behind him, looking nervous and overdressed, was Rachel. "Everyone, this is Rachel," Tom announced, as if presenting a prize. Rachel was pretty in an understated way, with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and a smile that looked practiced. She was carrying a store-bought pie and wearing heels that were completely inappropriate for a family Christmas gathering. "It's so nice to meet you all," Rachel said, her voice tight with anxiety. "Tom's told me so much about you." Margaret's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "How lovely. Please come in. Make yourself comfortable." The afternoon crawled by. They made small talk, drank wine, watched the kids tear through presents from under the tree, even though Christmas was technically tomorrow. Margaret fluttered between the kitchen and the living room, convinced something would go wrong with dinner. Robert held court by the fireplace, sharing stories everyone had heard a dozen times. Sarah found herself watching them all with a strange detachment. Her family, these people who shared her blood, her history, her name. But lately she'd felt like a stranger among them, like she was watching their lives through glass. Emma complained about David forgetting to wrap the presents again. Tom told elaborate stories about his job that made him sound more important than he was. Rachel laughed too loud at everything Tom said. Sophie and Jake fought over a toy until Emma threatened to take it away. Normal, mundane, familiar. By 6 p.m. they were all seated around the dining room table. Margaret had outdone herself. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green beans, rolls, cranberry sauce, and 3 different pies waiting on the counter. The conversation flowed around Sarah like water. She contributed when necessary, laughed at the right moments, but inside she felt hollow, empty, like she was going through the motions of being present without actually being there. She was pushing mashed potatoes around her plate when her father stood up, wineglass in hand. "I'd like to make a toast," Robert said, his face flushed from the wine and the warmth of the room. Everyone raised their glasses. This was tradition. Robert always made a toast on Christmas Eve. "I'm grateful for this family," he began, his voice thick with emotion and alcohol. "For these moments we have together, for—" And then he stopped. His face went pale, then grey. His free hand clutched at his chest, fingers clawing at his sweater. The wine glass slipped from his grip and shattered on the hardwood floor, red wine spreading like blood. "Robert!" Margaret screamed. Everything happened fast and slow at the same time. Robert collapsed. David jumped up to catch him, but missed. Tom was shouting for someone to call 911. Emma grabbed her phone with shaking hands. The kids started crying. Rachel stood frozen, one hand over her mouth. Sarah ran to her father's side. He was on the floor, eyes wide and scared, gasping for air that wouldn't come. She'd never seen him scared before. Robert Mitchell was always strong, always in control, always the one who fixed things. But he couldn't fix this. "Dad, stay with me," Sarah begged, grabbing his hand. It was cold, clammy. "The ambulance is coming, just hold on." His lips moved, trying to form words, but nothing came out except a wet, rattling sound. Margaret was on the floor beside him, sobbing, holding his other hand. "Don't you dare leave me, Robert. Don't you dare." The paramedics arrived in 12 minutes. It felt like hours. They worked on Robert right there on the dining room floor, surrounded by the ruins of Christmas dinner. Chest compressions, defibrillator, medications pushed through an IV. But Sarah already knew. She could see it in the paramedics' faces, the way they looked at each other, the way they moved from urgent to perfunctory. Robert Mitchell was pronounced dead at 6:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Massive heart attack. Nothing anyone could have done. The rest of the evening dissolved into a nightmare. Police, phone calls to relatives, funeral arrangements that had to be made. Margaret in shock, unable to process that her husband of 40 years was simply gone. Emma and Tom trying to hold it together for the kids. David handling the logistics because someone had to. Sarah sat on the stairs and stared at nothing. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This wasn't supposed to happen. Her father was healthy. He played golf twice a week. He'd just had a physical last month. How could he just die? By 3 a.m., Sarah finally made it home. She didn't remember the drive. She walked into her empty apartment, didn't bother to turn on the lights, and collapsed onto her bed fully clothed. Christmas Day was in 3 hours, but Sarah didn't care. Christmas was cancelled. Christmas was over. Christmas would never be the same. She closed her eyes and waited for sleep to take her away from this nightmare. And then she woke up to Mariah Carey singing "All I Want for Christmas." At first, Sarah thought she was still asleep, that this was some grief-induced dream her brain had conjured to protect her from the reality of her father's death. But everything was too real, too detailed. The exact same 3 texts from Emma on her phone, time-stamped between 6:15 and 6:47 a.m. The same radio announcer's voice introducing the same song. The same sunlight filtering through her curtains in the exact same pattern. She got out of bed in a daze and walked to her kitchen, made coffee. The bag of coffee beans was full, even though she'd used the last of it yesterday morning. The milk in her fridge had an expiration date 3 days away, the same date it had yesterday. Sarah grabbed her phone with shaking hands and called her mother's house. 3 rings, then, "Hello?" Her father's voice, alive, strong, completely normal. Sarah dropped the phone. It clattered on the counter. She heard his voice, tinny and distant. "Hello? Sarah? Are you there?" This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. Her father was dead. She'd watched him die, watched the paramedics try to save him, watched them cover his body with a sheet. She picked up the phone. "Dad? Sarah, you sound strange. Are you all right?" Yeah, I'm fine. Are you okay?" "Of course I'm okay. Why wouldn't I be? Are you coming over today? Your mother's already driving me crazy about the cranberry sauce." "I'll be there, I promise." She ended the call and sat down hard on her kitchen floor. What was happening? Had yesterday been a dream? But it had felt so real. Too real. She could still feel her father's cold hand in hers, still hear Margaret's screams, still smell the hospital antiseptic. Sarah went through her morning routine like a zombie. Shower, dress, coffee. But her mind was racing, trying to make sense of the impossible. She drove to her parents' house in a fog, nearly running 2 red lights. When she pulled into the driveway, she just sat there, staring at the house. The Christmas lights, the wreath on the door. Her father inside, alive, breathing, fixing a fireplace that didn't need fixing. She walked in carrying the cranberry sauce. "Sarah, finally!" Margaret appeared from the kitchen, wearing the same festive apron, the same stressed expression. It was exactly the same, word for word, beat for beat. And then her father's voice. "I heard that, Margaret. I was busy fixing the fireplace." Sarah felt like she was losing her mind. She grabbed Emma's arm when her sister appeared with the wine. "Emma, what day is it?" "What?" Emma looked confused. "December 24th, Christmas Eve. Are you okay? You look terrible." Did Dad die yesterday? What? Sarah, what are you talking about? Dad's right there in the living room. Are you feeling all right? Sarah shook her head. I'm fine, sorry, I didn't sleep well. But she wasn't fine. Because if this was December 24th again, if yesterday had somehow reset, then it was going to happen again. Her father was going to die. Again. She watched him all day like a hawk, monitored how much wine he drank, checked that her mother had his heart medication in her purse. When dinner time approached, Sarah's anxiety spiked. This was when it happened, during the toast. The family sat down at the table. Margaret brought out the turkey. Everyone filled their plates, and then Robert stood up, wine glass in hand, to make his toast. Sarah was ready. The second he started to look pale, the second his hand moved toward his chest, she would act. She'd already looked up the symptoms of a heart attack. She knew what to do. I'd like to make a toast, Robert said. Sarah's hand was on her phone, ready to dial 911. I'm grateful for this family, Robert continued, for these moments we have together, for the love that surrounds this table. We don't get enough of these moments, and we never know which one will be our last. He was fine. His color was good. His breathing was normal. So here's to family, to love, to Christmas, and to many more years of gatherings just like this one. Everyone clinked glasses. Robert sat down and started eating. Sarah stared at him, confused. He was fine, completely fine. She'd changed it. Somehow, by knowing, by watching, by being ready, she'd changed the timeline. Her father wasn't going to die. Sarah felt relief flood through her body so intensely she almost cried. It worked. Whatever this was, whatever impossible thing was happening, she'd figured it out. She'd saved him. The dinner continued normally. Laughter, stories, the kids getting cranberry sauce on their nice clothes. Tom and Rachel making googly eyes at each other, Emma and David bickering about something trivial. After dinner, they all moved to the living room. The kids wanted to go sledding on the hill behind the house. There was a good slope there, perfect for it, and the snow was fresh. Can we, Mom, please? Sophie begged. It's dark out, Emma said. There's a full moon, Jake pointed out. We can see fine. Emma looked at David, who shrugged. Let them burn off some energy. We'll all go out, watch them. They all bundled up and headed outside. The moon was indeed bright, casting silver light across the snow. Sophie and Jake grabbed the sled from the garage, arguing about who got to go first. Sarah stood at the top of the hill, her breath fogging in the cold air. Something felt wrong, a tension in her chest. A whisper of dread. Sarah, come on, Tom called. You're missing it. Sophie climbed onto the sled. Jake pushed her from behind, and she went flying down the hill, screaming with delight. Everyone laughed and clapped. My turn, Jake shouted, running back up the hill. But when he pushed off, something went wrong. The sled hit a patch of ice Sarah hadn't seen. Jake was going too fast, too out of control. The sled veered sideways, racing toward the tree line at the bottom of the hill. Jake! Emma screamed. Jake! Sarah started running, but she was too far away. They were all too far away. The sled slammed into a tree with a sound like a gunshot in the quiet night. Jake didn't get up. Emma was running, slipping in the snow, screaming her son's name. David was right behind her. Sarah felt like she was moving through water, everything slow and dreamlike and wrong. By the time they reached him, Sarah knew. The angle of his neck, the way he was lying, the unnatural stillness. Emma was screaming, pulling Jake into her arms, begging him to wake up, to move, to breathe. But he was 7 years old and he was dead, and Christmas was ruined again. The ambulance came. The police came. But there was nothing anyone could do. Severe head trauma. Death was instantaneous. Sarah sat in the snow and stared at the stars. This wasn't possible. She'd saved her father. She'd watched him so carefully. She'd changed things. But someone had died anyway. By 3 a.m. Sarah was back in her bed staring at the ceiling. What was happening? Was this hell? Was she being punished for something? Was the universe broken? She closed her eyes, knowing what would happen, dreading it. And when she opened them again, Mariah Carey was singing, and it was 7 a.m. on December 24th. Loop 3. This time, Sarah tried to keep everyone inside. No sledding, no outdoor activities. She faked a migraine when the kids asked, claiming she needed everyone to stay in and be quiet. Emma was annoyed but agreed. Sophie and Jake pouted but eventually settled down with video games in the living room. Dinner went smoothly. Her father made his toast, alive and well. Sarah started to relax. Maybe this was the key. Just keep everyone inside, keep them safe. But then David mentioned that some of the outdoor Christmas lights had gone out. "I'll just run out and fix them real quick," he said, grabbing his coat. "No," Sarah said too loudly. Everyone stared at her. "I mean, it's late. It can wait." "Sarah, it'll take 5 minutes," David said, looking at her like she was crazy. "I've got to do it anyway." Before she could stop him, he was outside. Sarah heard him dragging the ladder from the garage. Her heart was pounding. She wanted to run out there, pull him down, force him inside. But what would she say? That she was stuck in a time loop and everyone kept dying? They'd think she was insane. 10 minutes later, there was a crash, a sickening thud. David had slipped on ice on the roof, fallen 20 feet onto the driveway. Broken neck, dead before anyone reached him. Loop 4. Sarah unplugged all the outdoor lights before anyone arrived. David stayed inside, but Tom decided to leave early to drive Rachel home. He was tired, he'd had too much wine, and he shouldn't have been driving, but he did it anyway. He never made it home. A drunk driver ran a red light at the intersection of Main and Oak. Tom's car was crushed. He and Rachel died instantly. Loop 5. Sarah convinced Tom to stay the night, gave him coffee, made sure he was sober. He lived. But Margaret had an allergic reaction to something in the stuffing. Anaphylactic shock. They couldn't find her EpiPen in time. She died on the kitchen floor while her family watched helplessly. Loop 6. Sarah checked all the food for allergens, made her mother keep her EpiPen in her pocket. Margaret lived. But Robert had his heart attack anyway, despite Sarah watching him constantly. Loop 7. Emma got into a car accident on the way over, hit a patch of black ice. Her car rolled 3 times. She died before the ambulance arrived. Loop 8. Sophie fell down the stairs and broke her neck. Loop 9. Rachel choked on a piece of turkey, and no one could perform the Heimlich maneuver correctly in time. Loop after loop after loop. Different family members, different causes, different moments, but always, always, someone died before midnight on Christmas Eve, always before Christmas Day could arrive. By loop 15, Sarah had stopped trying to look normal. She showed up to her parents' house with unwashed hair, dark circles under her eyes, wearing the same clothes she'd worn the day before, which was also today, which was always today. "Sarah, are you okay?" Emma asked, concern clear in her voice. "You look terrible." "I'm fine," Sarah lied, "just tired." But she wasn't fine. She was breaking. Every death played on repeat in her mind. Her father's cold hand, Jake's broken body, David's neck bent at an impossible angle, Tom's crushed car, her mother's blue lips, Emma's blood in the snow, Sophie's empty eyes. She'd tried everything. Cancelling Christmas, her family showed up anyway, keeping everyone separated. Someone always found a way to die. Warning them, they thought she was having a breakdown. Staying awake all night to watch them, exhaustion made her sloppy. Nothing worked. The universe, fate, God, whatever was doing this, it wanted someone to die on December 24th, and it would make sure it happened, no matter what Sarah did. Loop 20. Sarah had started documenting everything. She filled notebooks with details, times, causes of death, variables she'd changed, patterns she'd noticed. She'd created a complex chart on her apartment wall, connecting facts with red string like a conspiracy theorist. There had to be a key, a solution, a way to save them all. She tried loop 20 by arriving late, thinking maybe her presence was the trigger. Her father died in a car accident on the way to pick up last-minute groceries. Loop 21, she arrived early and helped with all the preparations. Sophie drowned in the bathtub after sneaking away during dinner. Loop 22, she drugged everyone's food to make them all fall asleep before anything bad could happen. Tom woke up confused in the middle of the night, wandered outside and froze to death. 23 loops, 23 deaths, 23 ways to watch the people she loved die. Sarah was sitting in her apartment on December 24th, again, when the truth finally hit her. She was the constant. She was the only person who was always present, always aware, always trying to change things. Everyone else was living December 24th for the first time, every time, but Sarah had lived it 23 times. What if she was the problem? What if she was the one who was supposed to die? Loop 24 began like all the others. Mariah Carey, 7 a.m., December 24th. But this time, Sarah didn't get out of bed. She lay there staring at the ceiling, piecing it all together. Think about the pattern. Someone had to die before Christmas Day. Always before midnight. Always before December 25th could arrive. And the only person who never died was Sarah herself. Every time she prevented one death, another person died instead. The universe was being flexible about WHO died, but it was inflexible about someone dying, which meant there was a death that was supposed to happen, a specific death. And by preventing it, by staying alive, Sarah was forcing the universe to take someone else instead. She was the glitch. She was the problem. She was the one who was meant to die. Sarah got up and went through her morning routine mechanically. She knew what she had to do. She just didn't know if she had the courage to do it. She drove to her parents' house, brought the cranberry sauce, helped her mother in the kitchen, played with Sophie and Jake, listened to Tom talk about Rachel. But this time, she was present in a way she'd never been before, really listening, really seeing them, not as obstacles to protect or variables to control, but as people, her family. During dinner, when Robert made his toast, Sarah really heard the words. We don't get enough of these moments, and we never know which one will be our last. He was right. You never knew. Life was fragile and finite and precious. After dinner, Sarah excused herself and went upstairs to her old bedroom. She sat on her childhood bed and pulled out her phone. She typed out messages to each family member, scheduled to send the next morning, on December 25th, the day she wouldn't see. To her mother, thank you for every bedtime story, every scraped knee you kissed, every time you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You're the strongest person I know. I love you. To her father, thank you for teaching me to ride a bike, to change a tire, to stand up for myself. Thank you for being steady when everything else was chaos. I love you, Dad. To Emma, you're an incredible mother. Sophie and Jake are so lucky. Stop doubting yourself. Stop trying to be perfect. You're already enough. I love you, sis. To Tom, marry Rachel. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't overthink it. Just be happy. You deserve that. I love you, little brother. To Sophie and Jake, stay curious, stay kind, be brave. The world needs people like you. Your Aunt Sarah loves you so much. To David and Rachel, thank you for loving my siblings. Thank you for being part of this family. Take care of them. Sarah looked at the clock. 11:15 p.m. She saved the scheduled messages and went back downstairs. Her family was in the living room watching It's a Wonderful Life. Her father's arm was around her mother. Emma and David sat close together on the couch, Emma's head on his shoulder. Tom and Rachel held hands. Sophie and Jake were sprawled on the floor, fighting sleep. This was what mattered. This moment, this love, this family. Sarah sat down between her parents. Her mother took her hand without looking away from the TV. Her father squeezed her shoulder. "I love you guys," Sarah said quietly. "We love you too, sweetheart," her mother replied. Sarah watched the movie, watched George Bailey realize what a wonderful life he had. How fitting. She felt it start at 11:47 p.m., a pressure in her chest, a fading at the edges of her vision, a coldness spreading through her limbs. This was it. This was what was supposed to happen on December 24th. Sarah Mitchell was supposed to die. She didn't say anything, didn't cry out, didn't ruin this perfect moment. She just squeezed her mother's hand tighter and looked at each of their faces, memorizing them. At 11:52 p.m., her mother noticed something was wrong. "Sarah, are you okay? You're so cold." "I'm fine, Mom, just tired." But Margaret knew her daughter. She turned to look at Sarah's face and gasped, "Robert, something's wrong with Sarah." Everyone turned. Sarah tried to smile, tried to tell them she was okay, but her lips wouldn't form the words. "Call 911!" Robert shouted. Emma already had her phone out. Tom was beside Sarah, supporting her as she slumped sideways. Rachel was crying. The kids were scared, asking what was wrong with Aunt Sarah. "Sarah, stay with us," her father begged. "The ambulance is coming, just hold on." But Sarah was already letting go. She looked at each of their faces one more time. She wanted to tell them it was okay, that this was supposed to happen, that by dying she was saving them all, that tomorrow, real tomorrow, December 25th, they would wake up and continue living, and that was her gift to them. But she couldn't speak, so she just smiled. She hoped they understood. At 11:58 p.m. on December 24th, Sarah Mitchell closed her eyes. At midnight, her heart stopped. The paramedics arrived at 12:07 a.m. They tried to revive her, but it was too late. Sarah Mitchell died of a sudden brain aneurysm at 12:11 a.m. on December 25th, surrounded by her family. For the first time in 24 loops, Christmas Day arrived. Margaret Mitchell woke up on Christmas morning to her alarm. She reached over to turn it off, then lay there for a moment, not wanting to face the day, the worst day, the day after they'd lost Sarah. She could hear people moving around downstairs. The whole family had stayed the night. No one wanted to be alone. When Margaret came downstairs, she found them all in the living room, some on the couches, some on the floor where they'd eventually fallen asleep. Emma was awake, staring at her phone with tears streaming down her face. "What is it?" Margaret asked, her voice hoarse. "What's wrong?" Emma looked up. "It's Sarah. She sent us all messages. They were scheduled to arrive this morning." One by one, everyone woke up and saw the messages. Margaret read hers 3 times, then 4, then 5. The words blurred through her tears. "She knew," Tom said quietly. "She knew she was going to die." "How could she know that?" David asked. "An aneurysm it's random, unpredictable." But Rachel shook her head. The way she was acting yesterday, how present she was, how she kept saying she loved us. She knew. Robert stood up abruptly and walked out of the room. Margaret found him in the garage, sitting in his car, reading Sarah's message over and over. She got in beside him and they held each other and cried. The police were called. They'd left the night before after the paramedics had taken Sarah's body, but they needed to come back, file more reports, ask more questions. But there were no answers, no note, no explanation, just scheduled text messages that suggested Sarah had known somehow that she wouldn't see Christmas morning. The funeral was held 3 days later. The church was packed. Sarah had touched more lives than anyone realized. Friends from high school, colleagues from old jobs, neighbors, acquaintances. But it was her family who hurt the most. They kept thinking about all the things they should have said, the time they'd wasted being petty or distant, The fact that the last Christmas Eve with Sarah had been marked by their typical dysfunction, and they hadn't known it was the last. Except Sarah had known, and she'd spent it loving them anyway. In the weeks that followed, the Mitchell family slowly learned to function again, but they were different, changed. Margaret stopped sweating the small stuff, stopped making lists no one would read, started appreciating Robert while he was still there. Robert spent more time with his grandkids, played with them, really played, getting down on the floor and being silly, the way he'd been too dignified to do before. Emma stopped trying to be perfect, let the house be messy, let herself be human, hugged her kids more and worried about appearances less. Tom married Rachel 6 months later. It was a small ceremony, family only. And they left an empty chair for Sarah, with her favorite flowers on the seat. Every year after that, on Christmas Eve, the Mitchell family would gather. They'd make the same meal, tell the same stories, and at dinner they'd raise a glass to Sarah. But they never knew the whole truth. They never knew about the loops, about the 24 times Sarah had lived December 24th, about the 23 times she'd watched them die and desperately tried to save them. They never knew that Sarah had sacrificed herself so they could live, that she'd chosen to die so they could see December 25th. All they knew was that they missed her, that Christmas would never be quite the same, and that somehow, in dying, Sarah had taught them how to live. But this isn't where the story ends, because Sarah didn't just die. She woke up, not in her bed, not to Mariah Carey, not to December 24th at 7 a.m. She woke up in darkness, complete and total darkness. She couldn't see her hands in front of her face, couldn't see anything at all. "Hello," Sarah called out. Her voice echoed as if she was in a vast, empty space. No response, just the echo of her own voice, fading into nothing. She tried to stand, but she couldn't tell if she was already standing. There was no ground beneath her feet, but she wasn't falling. No walls to touch, no ceiling, no floor, just void. "Is anyone there?" she tried again. This time something answered. "Hello, Sarah." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It wasn't male or female, young or old. It simply was. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. "Where am I?" "I am the keeper of the loop, and you are in the space between." "Between what?" "Between dying and moving on, between December 24th and December 25th, between what was and what could have been." Sarah's heart was racing. Or was it? Did she even have a heart anymore? "Am I dead?" "That depends on your definition of death. Your body stopped functioning, yes, but you're still here, still aware, still unfinished." "Unfinished? I did what I was supposed to do. I figured it out. I died so my family could live." The voice was quiet for a moment, then, "Did you?" Suddenly, images appeared in the darkness. Sarah watched herself in loop after loop, watching her family die, trying frantically to save them, becoming more desperate, more manic, more broken. "You thought you were saving them," the voice said. "But what were you really doing?" "I was trying to stop them from dying." "No, you were trying to control death, to cheat it, to bend the universe to your will." Sarah watched herself in loop 15, unwashed and manic, trying to force her family to do what she wanted. Watched herself in loop 20, drugging their food. Watched herself become so obsessed with preventing death that she forgot to actually live. The loop wasn't a punishment, Sarah. It was a test. A test. A test. I watched my family die 23 times. What kind of sick test is that? A test to see if you would learn the lesson. But you didn't learn it until the very end. The images shifted. Sarah watched herself in loop 24, actually listening to her family, being present, letting go of control, accepting what was coming. "That's when you finally understood," the voice said, "that love isn't about control. It's about presence. It's about cherishing the moments you have, not desperately clinging to the moments you fear losing." But I still died, Sarah said. I still had to sacrifice myself. Yes, because that was always the price. December 24th was your last day. That was always true. The loop didn't change that. It only gave you the chance to choose how you would spend it. Sarah felt tears on her face, though she wasn't sure she actually had a face anymore. So all those loops, all that suffering, it was just to teach me a lesson. It was to give you a choice. You could have spent your last day in fear, in desperation, trying futilely to prevent the inevitable. Or you could have spent it in love, in peace, accepting what was coming and making the most of the time you had. That's not fair. No, the voice agreed. It's not fair. Death rarely is. But it's the truth of existence. We all have a last day. Most people don't know when it's coming. You did. And once you accepted that, once you stopped fighting and started living, you broke the loop. The darkness around Sarah began to lighten. Not much, but enough that she could see her own hands, her own body, translucent and glowing slightly. What happens now? She asked. Now you move on. You go to whatever comes next. Your family will grieve, but they'll live. They'll have many more Christmases. And because of how you spent your last day with them, because of the love you showed them, they'll be better people. They'll appreciate each other more. They'll waste less time on the things that don't matter. Will they remember me? Every day, every Christmas, every time they gather as a family, you'll be there in the empty chair, in the stories they tell, in the way they love each other a little fiercer because they know how fragile life is. Sarah looked down at her hands. They were fading, becoming more transparent. I'm scared. I know. Everyone is at the end. But you've already died once. This time you don't have to do it alone. In the growing light, Sarah saw figures, people she'd known who had passed. Her grandmother, who'd died when Sarah was 12, her childhood dog, a friend from high school who'd been killed in a car accident, and further back, in the distance, she saw something else, something bright and warm and infinite. She couldn't quite see what it was, but it pulled at her, called to her. Is that heaven? Heaven, the afterlife, the next stage, whatever you want to call it. It's where you go when you finally let go. Sarah took a step toward the light, then stopped. Can I ask you something? Yes. Why me? Why did I have to die? Why couldn't it have been, I don't know, later, when I was old and had lived a full life? The voice was gentle. Sarah, you're 32 years old. You'd lost your job, your relationship, your sense of purpose. You were going through the motions of living without actually being alive. And in 24 loops, you experienced more life, more love, more understanding than many people get in 80 years. You learned what truly mattered. You got to say goodbye to everyone you loved. How many people get that gift? Sarah thought about it. Thought about those final hours with her family. How present she'd been. How much she'd appreciated them. How she'd really seen them, maybe for the first time. I guess, when you put it that way, you were given something precious, Sarah. Knowledge, awareness, time. Most people waste their last day because they don't know it's their last. You didn't. You made it count. Sarah nodded. She understood now. It still hurt. She still wished she could have had more time. But she'd been given something most people never got, the chance to make her death mean something. She started walking toward the light. The figures in the distance came closer. Her grandmother smiled at her. Her old friend waved. Sarah, the voice called. She turned back. Your family will be okay. I promise you that. And when their time comes, when they each have their own December 24th, you'll be here waiting. You'll help them cross over. You'll show them it's not so scary. Sarah smiled through her tears. I'd like that. Then go. Move on. You've earned your rest. Sarah turned back to the light and walked forward. With each step, she felt lighter. The pain, the grief, the regret, it all fell away. By the time she reached her grandmother's outstretched arms, she felt nothing but peace. And in the living world, in a house on Maple Street where a family was grieving, a strange thing happened. They all felt it at the same time. A warmth, a presence, a sense of peace they couldn't explain. Margaret was in the kitchen when she felt it, a hand on her shoulder, though no one was there. And she knew somehow that Sarah was okay, that wherever she wasn't suffering. Robert felt it in the garage, reading Sarah's message for the 100th time, a certainty deep in his bones that his daughter was at peace. Emma felt it while holding her children, a whisper in her ear, though no one spoke. "They're safe. You're doing great. I love you." Tom felt it standing at Sarah's grave with Rachel, a breeze that didn't quite match the weather, warm and gentle, that felt like a hug. They never talked about these moments. Some things were too precious, too sacred to share, but they all knew. They all felt it. Sarah was gone, but she wasn't lost. She was somewhere better, somewhere peaceful, somewhere she could finally rest. And every Christmas Eve, when they raised a glass to her memory, they felt her there. Not in a creepy, haunted way, but in the way that love transcends death, in the way that the people who truly touch our hearts never really leave us. 20 years later, the Mitchell family still gathered on Christmas Eve. Margaret and Robert were in their 80s now, slower but still sharp. Emma's kids were adults. Sophie was married with her own child. Jake was engaged. Tom and Rachel had 3 kids running around, filling the house with noise and chaos. The traditions had evolved, but the core remained. The same meal, the same stories, the same toast at dinner. Robert stood, wineglass in hand, and the room fell quiet. This was his moment, every year. "I want to toast to Sarah," he said, his voice still strong despite his age. 20 years ago today, we lost her. But in losing her, she taught us something. She taught us that life is precious, that love is what matters, that family is everything. He looked around the table at the faces of his family, his wife of 60 years, his daughters and son, his grandchildren, his great-grandchild. Sarah never got to see this, he continued. She never got to meet Sophie's husband or hold Jake's child or watch Tom's kids grow up. But I believe wherever she is, she knows. She sees us. And she's happy that we're together, that we didn't let grief tear us apart, that we kept loving each other, kept gathering, kept being a family. That love is what matters. That family is everything. He looked around the table at the faces of his family, his wife of 60 years, his daughters and son, his grandchildren, his great-grandchild. Sarah never got to see this, he continued. She never got to meet Sophie's husband or hold Jake's child or watch Tom's kids grow up. But I believe wherever she is, she knows. She sees us. And she's happy that we're together, that we didn't let grief tear us apart, that we kept loving each other, kept gathering, kept being a family. Everyone raised their glasses. "To Sarah," they said in unison. "To Sarah," Robert echoed. "May we honor her memory by living fully, loving deeply, and never taking for granted the time we have with each other." They drank, they ate, they laughed and told stories and argued about politics and teased each other and were a family. And in the empty chair at the end of the table, where they always left a space for Sarah, the flowers seemed to glow a little brighter in the candlelight. If you looked very closely, if you believed in such things, you might have seen her there. Just for a moment. A translucent figure, young and smiling, watching over the family she loved. But then you'd blink, and she'd be gone. Just flowers in an empty chair. Just a memory. Just love that refused to die. But here's the thing about time loops and death and the spaces between. Here's the thing about stories that seem to end but never really do. Sarah opened her eyes to the sound of Mariah Carey singing "All I Want for Christmas," 7 a.m., December 24th. "No," she whispered. "No, No, no, I did what I was supposed to do. I died. I moved on. This can't be happening. But it was happening. She grabbed her phone. 3 texts from Emma about dinner preparations. She ran to her kitchen, full bag of coffee beans, fresh milk in the fridge. She called her mother's house with shaking hands. Hello? Her father's voice, alive, breathing, completely normal. Sarah hung up and slid down the wall to the floor. She'd thought she understood. She'd thought dying was the answer. She'd thought accepting her death and spending her last day loving her family would break the loop. But she was wrong, because here she was, again, still, always. December 24th, 7 a.m. Loop 25. And somewhere in the space between death and life, between December 24th and December 25th, between what is and what could be, something laughed. Not cruelly, not with malice, but with the ancient, incomprehensible humor of the universe itself. Because some loops aren't meant to be broken. Some lessons take more than 24 tries to learn. Some deaths have to be died 1,000 times before they stick. Sarah Mitchell got up off her kitchen floor. She made her coffee. She checked the texts from Emma. She got dressed. And she drove to her parents' house to live December 24th one more time. Because what else could she do? What else was there but to keep trying, keep loving, keep hoping that maybe this time, this loop, would be the one that finally set her free? If you made it this far, if you watched Sarah's entire journey through hell disguised as Christmas, then you understand something important. Life is a loop we're all trapped in. We wake up, we go through our routines, we face our problems, and we go to sleep only to do it all again tomorrow. The question isn't whether you're in a loop. You are. We all are. The question is, what will you do with the time you have? Will you waste it fighting against things you can't control? Or will you spend it loving the people who matter? Will you appreciate each day, or will you take them for granted until they're gone? Will you be present, or will you just go through the motions? Sarah's story is a horror story, but it's also the truth about being human. We're all living on borrowed time. We all have a last December 24th coming. We just don't know when. So what will you do with today? If you enjoyed this story, if it made you think, if it made you feel something, hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, because I create stories like this every week. Stories that will keep you up at night. Stories that will make you see the world differently. Share this video with someone you love. Tell them you appreciate them, because unlike Sarah, you still have time. Leave a comment below. Would you make the same choice Sarah did? Would you die to save your family? Or would you keep fighting, keep trying to break the loop, no matter how many times you failed? I read every single comment. I want to know what you think. And remember, December 25th only comes for those who survive December 24th. Make sure you're one of them.